Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad to have you here for this DSA call. Special thanks to DJ Kara for bringing us in. And want to encourage everybody to introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're coming from. If you're a member of DSA, maybe what chapter you're from. If you're not yet, you can tell us or not tell us, but let us know where you're coming from, and maybe you'll meet some new friends and neighbors there in the chat. My name is Megan Romer. I am one of DSA's national co-chairs. I am located in rural central New York, but I used to be in New York City, and before that I was in Southwest Louisiana. So I've been in three different, very different DSA circumstances. I am a mom, a writer, and a longtime activist, but not one who became a socialist until I was in my late 30s. And what really made me become a socialist was actually joining DSA and doing work alongside my comrades. That sounds strange, but I joined DSA because I felt like the local Democratic Party just wasn't doing enough. And they weren't quite far enough left for me, but I wasn't too much to the left of them. But actually doing the work and organizing is what pulled me leftward. So very glad to see so many folks here. And I am going to go ahead and pass it off first thing to my co-chair, Ashik. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm already skipping ahead. First, we have to do a poll. We are going to ask you in a poll how you learned about DSA. If you are already a DSA member, answer anyway. It's helpful to us to know what brought you into DSA in the first place. I will tell you that for me, it was a friend. It was a friend who said, oh, you're frustrated with the local Democratic Party. Why don't you come do this thing that I'm doing? And I was like, I don't know. And then I did, and it was history. So yeah, if you should see a poll pop up on your screen. Maybe you learned about it from a friend, maybe a family member, maybe your mom told you about DSA. That would be cool. Maybe you heard about it from a campaign. Maybe somebody knocked on your door and said, hey, want to sign my petition for this ballot measure? Maybe you heard about us on social media. It is, in fact, 2024. That is where we learn about a lot of things. Or maybe it's some totally different way. But yeah, definitely respond to the poll, and we'll share in just a minute. Excited to see people from so many different places in the country. Literally all three coasts, East, West, and Gulf. Big cities, small towns. We got several upstaters. What's up, fellow upstaters? Really excited to see so many people, and somebody who I got a tattoo with. So shout out to Comrade Zane from Salt Lake City DSA. We all went and got bees when I visited their chapter. We're going to show you the results here, and you can see where other folks came from. And now that we have gone through the poll, I am going to pass it off to my co-chair, Comrade Ashik.
Hey, comrades. Really great to be here with you today. My name is Ashik Sadiq. I'm the other co-chair of DSA. I'm based in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. And very glad to have you here, especially if you're not a DSA member. Very short pitch. DSA is the largest socialist organization in the United States in generations, certainly in my lifetime. And we are focused on organizing in a bunch of different ways that you'll hear about on this call. But just wanted to start with a little bit of a grounding about what an unprecedented political moment this is in modern US history. We have a presidential candidate who is an incumbent who won the primaries, and then after locking in the entire establishment support, has been forced to drop out. And the context for him dropping out is this ongoing genocide in Palestine that has been funded with US taxpayer dollars, directly supporting the weapons that the state of Israel has been using to massacre now almost 40,000 people accounted dead since October. A recent study found that there could be up to 186,000 total deaths in Gaza by the time more people can be counted. And that's like 8% of Gaza's population, 2.4 million people. That's like compare that to like Philadelphia or a major American city. So, that's just something to ground us in this conversation that we're having today, which I think we can celebrate a little bit, that the social movements have created the pressure through Uncommitted and other things that you'll hear about today that said very early on that this is somebody who's unfit to lead for many reasons, including the support for genocide. So by the time he underperformed in a debate and kind of just blanked out against Trump, it was already clear to many of us why he was unfit to lead. That was kind of the least of it. So DSA came out immediately after that debate to say he should drop out after many months of saying that somebody who supports genocide shouldn't be the presidential candidate. We hadn't yet said he should drop out. We were focusing on the genocide itself and saying that support for that had to stop, and somebody who is actively supporting it should not be the president, which left room for the presidential candidate to change that policy of supporting genocide. And that didn't happen. So by the time he blanked out on CNN, it just felt like time to call it, but also with the sense that the entire Democratic Party establishment and talking heads would be saying he's not fit to lead for not being able to complete a sentence. We knew it was also an important opportunity to reframe to what we had been protesting all along, along with hundreds of thousands of people across the country. So, I have to say that in this moment that Kamala Harris is now the presumptive nominee, I personally am enjoying the coconut memes and, a lot of what we're seeing on the internet. But it also reinforces that this was never about just one candidate, especially for us in DSA, like as socialists, as people connected to social movements and organizing in, for electoral campaigns in our workplaces in all sorts of ways. We aren't solely focused on electoral politics, and especially not at the top of the ballot. Like a lot of us came to DSA. I myself joined in 2017 after supporting Bernie in 2016. And Bernie Sanders' campaigns for two presidential cycles are a huge part of what activated a lot of people to democratic socialism and understanding that there could be an alternative to what we understand as a two-party system. Um, but I think for a lot of us in DSA or who've just come to love politics, we've learned to understand that formally we have a two-party system, but really it's more like a no-party system. There's no way for most people to participate in any kind of structure that influences politics except protesting, except posting on social media. And meanwhile, the actual party structures are just hollowing out and being influenced more and more by social forces that are pretty terrifying. Like already, it's capitalists who run the economy and the political system who have so much influence in both parties. But meanwhile, the Republican Party is lurching further and further right. Like what Trump represents is, the rise of like fascism for the 21st century. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party offers little to most people without much of a social base. And a lot of what people experience as electoral politics kind of just comes down to branding on TV. There's not much democracy. Most people have little experience in collective decision making in their workplaces and electoral politics or in any kind of organization. And if you know anything about American history, if you've come to the left for any sort of reason, you've probably learned a bit about major social movements of the past century, like the civil rights movement, like the environmental movement, like gay liberation, women's rights, like the New Deal. And all of these things ultimately that won huge gains for working class people in the country were won with organized labor as a major backbone. Like they came about in moments where organized labor unions were more militant, were much more active, were a much bigger part of the population. And people had experience in their workplaces organizing against their terrible bosses to win things together and to fight. And then that kind of energy that came from that experience in your day-to-day life transferred into electoral politics and into social movements. And that's something that we've really been missing for decades now. And I've been thinking a lot the past 8 months, like especially while being in DSA leadership, about what makes this moment different. Like what accounts for this huge breakthrough that we're seeing with millions of people on the streets protesting for Palestine and actually making a difference in very concrete ways. And part of it is, well, you'll hear more about specific reasons for that from other people on this call, but I'll just say a little bit from my own experience. I've been in DSA for almost a decade, and I've been through a bunch of movement moments since Occupy Wall Street and then the climate movement and Black Lives Matter. And you had millions of people on the streets in those moments. And then there was kind of a feeling after they dissipated, like, well, why did they? Why didn't anything, uh, why was, what kinds of institutions were built through that? A lot of us in DSA came to DSA because we wanted to build an organization, and many people joined other organizations. But in this moment, I've thought a lot about what makes the movement for Palestine and the breakthroughs it's experiencing now different from after 9/11 or about um, other moments like that. So when I was a preteen, 9/11 happened. I remember when the the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were starting. And after when the invasion of Afghanistan was gearing up, there was only one person who protested in Congress. That was Representative Barbara Lee. And then millions of people were on the streets against the Iraq War, and then it just continued for a decade. And I've thought a little bit too about my own family's background. My parents are from Bangladesh. They immigrated in the late 70s, and Bangladesh became independent after a very bloody liberation war in 1971. Hundreds of thousands to millions of people were killed in a genocide that was, it turned out later, actively supported by the US government. And at the time, like when I learned about the history, aside from hearing the stories my parents told me, I learned that there was only one person who was protesting it in Congress. That was Ted Kennedy. So in this moment that many people have been speaking out for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, I that was just a basic comparison I made. Like in the past, you had one person in Congress who was speaking out against this horrible, bloody thing that the US was supporting, and they were hardly socialists. They were, good liberals, good on anti-imperialism in a bunch of ways, but that wasn't enough to stop things, and it was only one. So what makes it different now? In Congress, and I'm just focusing on electoral politics right now because we're talking about Biden, but the difference in this period, there's not just one person. Dozens of people have come out for a ceasefire, and the people who've been championing it are open socialists, members of DSA. You have Rashida Tlaib, who is a Palestinian woman from Detroit. She was censured for saying from the river to the sea, which is just a very basic statement of principle for Palestinians, and has been repeatedly a principled voice standing alone or among very few people speaking up for Palestinian rights or just basic humanity. She was censured for saying that. Just today, you might have seen that she's protesting Netanyahu, a war criminal, showing up in DC. And just repeatedly, she's out there speaking up. And there are so many threads about what makes her so amazing. One of them is that she's a daughter of a UAW auto worker, so just union militancy is kind of baked into her blood. We don't really think about genetics that way as socialists, but it's a really important part of what shaped her, not just her identity, but her history and background in a place that has deep labor roots. The other one, Cori Bush, who led on the resolution for a ceasefire and now is facing the fight over life for re-election the next month, which you'll hear more about on this call. You can help, and you definitely should. St. Louis DSA, the chapter has been her ground game, knocking doors and making sure people understand like what she represents and what the forces are against her. The establishment understands the threat that people like this are to them. Like Zionists get it. This is why AIPAC, the Israel lobby, poured $100 million into races this year to try to crush people who speak up at all for Palestine. So Cori Bush is a major target for them, and we're going to organize to make sure that they don't win and that we're building the forces that can counter this for years to come. So, this is just one example among many. We're going to hear more from others on this call about the Uncommitted campaign, which we really can't understate what a huge intervention this was. And DSA was a critical part of it. DSA chapters all over the country, starting in Detroit DSA and Michigan chapters, and then many others, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Maryland, Washington. I could go down the list, but these are chapters that led and knocked doors and told people, especially in communities, Muslim communities, Arabic speakers. There were Bangladeshi communities like in Michigan who were activated by this. And DSA members were helping translate things and knocking doors and just laying out this information about like, if you care about Palestine, here's how you can make a difference. So shout out to everybody who led on that. And I'll just wrap by talking about the role of labor a little bit. So a huge thing that just happened today is that 7 major labor unions, the UAW auto workers, AFA flight attendants, SEIU, NEA, APWU postal workers, UE, and IUPAT, the painters union, have called on the Biden administration and presumably the next candidate to halt all military aid to Israel. So we really can't understate, like as socialists or as people who, want major change in this country and in the world, this is such a huge intervention for labor unions to come out for something internationalist and to intervene in US foreign policy. And part of what made this possible is that there are DSA members in those unions, including in leadership, including in reform caucuses who helped transform the unions internally, who helped win major fights like the UAW contract fights last year against the big three auto companies. And all of these things are interconnected. Like the UAW contract wins are major interventions toward a Green New Deal, shaping how the electric vehicle transition happens. And as socialists, we know all these things are interconnected. Like the same people who are leading on Palestine in unions, in electoral politics, they're also leading on climate. They're leading on raising the minimum wage. They're leading on everything that we care about. And this is a huge part of building the world we want. And I will now gladly pass it over to others. So thank you. Socialists must lead.
Thanks, Ashik. I'm hype. Who's hype? Is everybody hype? Let's get some emojis. Yeah, that's the hype emoji. So I'm going to pass it off now to Comrade Zev, who is from a DSA committee called FORK, For Our Rights. Is it campaign or committee? For Our Rights campaign. And they're going to talk about our 2024 program. So take it away, Zev.
Thank you, Megan. So as Megan said, I'm Zev. I'm a substitute teacher in Brooklyn, a proud member of New York City DSA, and the co-chair of the For Our Rights campaign. And tonight we're giving a preview of DSA's 2024 program, Workers Deserve More. So what is a program? A program is an articulation of our members' shared, democratically deliberated on goals and how to achieve them. It's an analysis of the political moment, a vision for a truly democratic socialist society and a pathway for how to get there. And it represents a vision for what a new workers' party would look like, and what it would do if elected into office. But most importantly, it's a way to talk with other working people about what they're experiencing and bring them into our shared struggle. It describes the political moment first. Currently, working people have little power in their own lives. The planet is burning. Black and brown workers bear the brunt of capitalism's cruelties, and the rich are getting richer. Meanwhile, Republicans are threatening America's democratic institutions, and they're targeting abortion rights and trans rights, and they're seeking to divide us. Meanwhile, the Democrats have failed to act as a bulwark against the right and have funded a genocide in Gaza and lost the trust of millions of working people. But we believe a better world is possible. Through DSA, we are struggling together in our workplaces, in the streets, and at the ballot box. We have elected our members to office. You'll be hearing from JP tonight. He is a longtime Louisville DSA member, former co-chair of his chapter 2. We struggle alongside our coworkers. We've supported strikes, and we've made more than 350,000 calls demanding Congress support a ceasefire in Gaza. We are building towards an independent workers' political party, and we are ultimately fighting a battle for true democracy, a democratic constitution, and to build a more equal and liberated world. And so this is what we fight for in our program. We are fighting for a democracy for the working class. That is going to look like universal voting rights, statehood for Washington, D.C., a popular vote for president, proportional representation, expanding the number of the seats in the House of Representatives, abolishing the filibuster, and limiting the unchecked power of the Supreme Court. It means an economy for the working class, a 32-hour work week, the right for workers to form unions, and to tax the rich. We're going to build thriving communities for the working class. We will pass Medicare for all, end the war on drugs, fight mass incarceration, demilitarize the police, make public higher education free, cancel all student loan debt, make housing a human right, and provide paid family leave and universal childcare. And we're going to enact a working class foreign policy. First and foremost, we want a ceasefire in Gaza now. We want to slash the military budget and close overseas bases. We want to bring troops home and end economic sanctions. And we want freedom of movement for all workers. So here is how you get involved. Regardless of who wins in 2024, we need to build a movement, especially for whoever wins in 2025. This means joining DSA and bringing working people into our shared project. It means becoming active in your chapter and leading political discussion program. It means talking to members of your community about our program and why workers deserve more. It means pressuring elected officials to fight for the program. It means organizing in your union and your workplace to support the vision. And we need to support DSA-endorsed elected officials and candidates across the country who are fighting for our rights. So now is the perfect opportunity to join. You can enter the link that's on the screen. We're going to repost it in the chat, and we are going to demand what workers deserve, because workers deserve more.
Thank you so much, Comrade Zev. So we are going to hear now from one of our DSA electeds. Part of what we do in DSA is we are building our electoral system from the ground up, which means we are running people everywhere we can find someone to run in a race that works for them. And one of those many city council races that we ran and won was the race for Alma Castro, who is from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And Comrade Councilperson Alma, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, thank you all so much. Comrades, this is not only inspiring, but gives me hope for the future. We were able to change not only a local race, and I will sort of talk a little bit about what the city council race looked like. We are a nonpartisan race, so it gave us some opportunities, but we were able to influence a national election by changing this candidate. And so in our local chapter, one of the big conversations is, how do we interact with the local Democratic Party? I was elected in a nonpartisan race as an openly Democratic Socialist candidate in a two-party system. And the community came out for that. We knocked over 4,000 doors with the help of the DSA's amazing team. And we were able to overcome 3 other candidates in a ranked choice race. Now, being on council as one of the only leftists focusing on labor, and in particular, housing being a human right, and ending the huge exodus of traditional families. Santa Fe sits squarely on what is the Camino Real. We are an occupied territory in a really difficult and most recent part of the United States. So I am the only city councilor that doesn't say the Pledge of Allegiance, and it has been very clear that the militarization and nationalization of our political system is only going to get worse. We have been used here in the Southwest. I am one of the first folks who is the daughter of a Latin American immigrant to represent, and we've been fighting for language access. We've been fighting for the ability to speak Spanish at city council meetings, when through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we were promised dual access. So these are the small battles that we're able to fight at a municipal level, but then really scale up, as we can all see through the Uncommitted campaign. We were able to pass a resolution for ceasefire with an openly Zionist mayor, not in no small part to the work of DSA and the work of the left in general, tying labor, tying anti-colonialism, and also pro-Indigenous identities to the fight for a free Palestine. And it is only making us stronger. So I would love to hear more in the chat. I will put my email and stay connected, but I would love to hear more about how we can raise that minimum wage, make sure that everyone in the city of Santa Fe, and hopefully now that we were also able to elect DSA endorsed county commissioner with our tiny 2-person caucus, how we can expand and level up our influence over local government.
Thank you so much, Comrade Councilperson. I am excited to tell my teenager that there is a city council person in Santa Fe who will also not say the Pledge of Allegiance. So yeah, it's one fun thing about DSA is you find people across the country who are in very different circumstances. So, you know, a kid at a rural, mostly agricultural small public school is also not saying it, and a city council person is not saying it. And it's those little things, they do connect us. So we are going to hear now from a comrade from Chicago DSA. Comrade Dallas, are you here with us to talk a little bit about the DNC?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Hey, everyone. Hi. My name's Dallas, spelled just like the city. Born in 1995, and I only date myself because I guess there was a somewhat like famous show that was running during like the 90s, also by the name of Dallas. And my parents, I think, were big fans, or at least like it penetrated like their minds. And so way, way deep back, that's what popped forth when they were naming me. Anyway, yeah, I'm here from Chicago DSA, been a member since 2019, but I'm not from Chicago. I moved here. I'm a transplant. I'm actually from downstate Illinois, Bloomington Normal, home of the Illinois State Redbirds and State Farm. So some two great, wonderful contributions. I guess I am here to talk to you about the DNC that's coming up here in a little bit. I'll talk to you about, I guess, what has happened so far, what is soon to come, and I guess cap it off with how and why you should get involved. So to kick things off, back in March, Chicago DSA kind of formed a working group in order to explore like the campaign, planning out a campaign on how to raise awareness about the DNC coming to Chicago. Obviously, this was like a big opportunity to exert some pressure around Israel-Palestine, to pressure the Biden administration into stop their funding of the genocide. And so, you know, with that goal in mind, we started formulating a plan, and that plan eventually became this sort of crash the party campaign. That's our poem card you see on the slide right there. Was made by our wonderful Natalie Jackson. And the main goal is to participate in what is like a broader march for the purpose of changing administration policy in regards to Israel-Palestine. The coalition itself, it's a very broad coalition, about 100, 130 organizations. But I think DSA is different from these other organizations because these other organizations are not accountable to members in the same way that we are. The organization structure can kind of fluctuate between these groups. Sometimes they are just like good-hearted community organizations. Other times they're like heavy-handed staff-led organizations, and other times they're kind of like more shadowy, weird donor-led organizations. DSA is unique because we're actually trying to sort of politicize and make a political party out of this effort, whereas these other organizations are more single issue oriented groups. They're more activist collectives, not interested in mass organization like we are in DSA. And so as we are approaching the DNC, what we are trying to do is to sort of raise people awareness around the DNC in order to bring more than just the sort of like activist class, but also, you know, working class people of Chicago into the streets come the DNC. Part of that effort has meant that Chicago DSA is canvassing the city in order to pull people out here with us. So if you're in the city of Chicago and you're interested in canvassing some farmers markets, some street festivals and whatnot, well, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. But also we could use help from you, just nationally in general, phone banking people, because we do need help, I guess, connecting with our own members in order to turn people out to canvassing shifts, as well as to better coordinate, you know, actions and activities in the run up to the DNC. So those are a couple of ways that you can get involved. But I think that one thing that I'm really looking forward to is the possibility for like a mass meeting. You know, we as DSA will be organizing a couple of different events around the DNC. We're not just going to show up for the protests. We're also going to host our own events, host our own rallies, and we're also going to possibly support the uncommitted rallies as they turn into Not Another Bomb. So be on the lookout for the Not Another Bomb Coalition, as they may be hosting rallies in your city. And if not, then you can also take the lead on that as well. So yeah, I guess Megan's pulling me off stage at this point. If there was like a cane to pull at my
A
neck,
giant
that's what would be
shepherd's crook.
happening.
I'm just pulling you on the rolling chair, just rolling off the screen.
Yeah. And yeah, so real excited for being here, everyone, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dallas. It is really exciting to see what's coming out of Chicago DSA around the DNC. And I believe we also, as Dallas mentioned, there are likely going to be satellite actions around the country where we can all kind of, you know, show up and say, like, this isn't okay. You have to stop the genocide. This is not good enough, and demand better. Even, you know, even as we build our own thing, we can still demand better from them. So we are now going to go to our third DSA elected, another organizer who won in the South. We've got JP Lininger, who is coming to us from, I'm never going to say it right, Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, Louisville's how the natives say it, but you gotta really be here for a while before you observe it, or watch a lot of college basketball. They always say it right in college basketball. So my name is JP Lininger. I just won the primary here for city council in Louisville. Don't have an opponent in the fall, so just waiting until January until I'm seated. And I've been on the left for a long time, but I joined DSA in 2019 after being recruited by Robert Bell, who was another candidate in our chapter for years. And when I did finally join, I found an organization that was more mature and more serious than I could have possibly imagined. I was working as a staffer for Robert's campaigns in 2020 and 2022, canvassing working class voters, talking to our volunteers, and that changed my life because I saw that this was real, that working people in Louisville and beyond were ready to fight for one another. It changed my life to be a part of that. And, you know, Something we talk about a lot in DSA electoral organizing is the DSA difference, and that isn't just some special canvassing sauce or about mobilizing volunteers, but it's also about principled politics, about prioritizing needs of the working class over the establishment and the wealthy donors that they serve. We face a lot of challenges going forward here in Louisville from the Democratic establishment, just as much from the reactionaries on the far right. During the campaign, we heard over and over about how we weren't serious, that voters didn't care about the issues that we were raising at the door, that we needed to think smaller and be less political, that we should take a more moderate stance on the genocide in Gaza, and definitely stop saying the word genocide. That the rest of the council were never going to vote with us, even if we did somehow win, which we did win. We won by 20 points, just shy of an outright majority in a multi-way race, including with an incumbent. Because even though the developers did spend big against us, even with a popular governor cutting ads for the incumbent, our class struggle messaging without compromise resonated with the voters. One challenge we didn't have were consultants in the room with us echoing those calls to tone it down on Palestine or police reform, or to pull punches and play nice when we talked about developers and landlords buying access in City Hall. Our campaign was staffed top to bottom with DSA cadre. This was made possible by our chapter's emphasis on training our members to staff campaigns and run for office in our Louisville DSA Electoral Academy. Our very first academy, I spent part of the time training people on campaign finance laws, how to fundraise, stuff like that. But I spent the rest of my time as a member of the academy on the candidate training track. If it wasn't for that training, if it wasn't for my time spent as a co-chair of Louisville DSA, I would never have been ready to run for office. Our campaign was a DSA campaign. I was a DSA candidate. When we won, DSA was the exclusive lens that victory was viewed through and covered by the local media. Our volunteers were DSA. Our donations were DSA. Our launch only came after our campaign's local endorsement, and it never would have happened otherwise. That's the foundation of our political independence. That's how we can have a real DSA difference after the lights go out on the horse race spectacle of Election Day. In 2021, Zorhan Mamdani, a DSA elected in New York State Assembly, had an interview in Jacobin that was seared into my mind. And I talk about this all the time because this quote, he said, you go into that chamber and the way that is set up is for you to bend to power. All of the incentives for you to bend to power. And what will stop us from doing so is not some individual brilliance or anything about who we are as people. What will stop us from doing so is that we are members of what will soon become the largest socialist organization in the United States history has ever seen. The power of that organization is in our rank and file membership. I told voters every day during the campaign that I'm not special, that I'm just some guy, that we don't have a magic wand to fix our problems, that I can't do anything by myself, but just being one vote in that chamber. But we, us, fighting together in solidarity can't be stopped. That building movement is the only way to make real political change, not just in Louisville or Kentucky, but in the United States and the world. We're still small. If politics is in the millions, then we aren't even sniffing that yet. But if we're doing anything right, it's that we're building movement to get to politics, like we did fighting for the uncommitted campaigns across the country that contributed to this moment that we find ourselves in right now. The establishment, the media, they want to turn the page on Palestine. Building movement means not letting that happen. Look at how coverage of Gaza is non-existent now after months of being the biggest news story in the world because of the spectacle of Biden's disastrous performance in debates. As if the donors, the media, the establishment, they were shocked by Biden's mental decline only on June 27th, while conveniently sidestepping anything so messy as a democratic process or, God forbid, a primary in the service of the biannual call to save democracy. I truly believe that only by being organized, fighting together here in DSA, building on our successes and learning from our failures and remaining committed and accountable to our organization and our members together can the better world be built. If you came to this call because you're curious about DSA, I can say without doubt that joining DSA was one of the biggest and most consequential decisions of my life, not because it put me on the path to being on the city council, but because being an organized socialist in DSA, actively participating in my chapter and the national organization, showed me that there was a real world to win and nothing to lose but our chains. And building this movement with our neighbors and coworkers in our schools and in our unions, that's the only path to get there. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, JP. And you're going to hear again and again as you talk to DSA members that being in DSA and organizing with other socialists was a major part of what led us to become more organized and more socialist, right? Like we can't just be online all the time, tempting as it is. You actually have to get in there and do the work. But doing that is such an incredible alternative to doom scrolling, to just feeling forever like there's no hope. It both builds the movement, but it builds your own capacity for resilience and hope. So I'm going to pass it now to Comrade Francis, who is another member of, if you're not in DSA, you're going to discover we have a lot of acronyms. And one of them that is kind of funny, according to my gamer brother, is the NPC. That is our National Political Committee. So Francis is on the NPC with me. So we are NPCs.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, my name is Francis. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm excited to talk about how you can take action. If you were inspired by this call today and you want to get involved, what can you do? And I want to start by just telling you a little bit about my political journey. I initially joined DSA in late 2016, right after Trump was elected. I was living in New Orleans at the time, and so I grew to become a socialist in the South, like many of the folks who have spoken on this call today. And, you know, I was very involved in DSA and I learned so much and met so many incredible, inspiring people and developed my politics through DSA. And then I moved to Los Angeles and I got a job that was unionized. And so I was a socialist and then I joined the labor movement as an organized socialist. And because I had this experience in DSA that had taught me so much about, you know, the importance of organized workers fighting for a better world, I knew right away that I wanted to get really involved in my union. Usually on these calls, I wear my DSA shirt, but today I'm wearing my union shirt, CIR, the Committee for Interns and Residents. We're a part of SEIU. And because of my experience in DSA, I knew that I wanted to get really involved in my union. I joined the bargaining team. I helped us fight for a way stronger contract, higher wages, better benefits. And I'm really excited to bargain our next contract in just a few months. And I also helped, I ran for union leadership and went to the National Delegates Convention just recently, like a few months ago, for my union, where we fought really hard for really powerful pro-Palestine resolutions to pass at our CIR National Convention. And that was something that had never happened in CIR history. And we took a really bold pro-Palestine, pro-BDS stance as a union. And, you know, we're a little tiny baby union inside of big SEIU, but I'm sure that folks saw the news today that a number of really powerful, and that we talked about earlier on the call, a number of really big, really powerful unions sent a powerful letter to President Biden saying, end all military aid to Israel. And one of those unions was SEIU. And I'm not going to pretend that like my tiny little union is responsible for big SEIU taking action, but it definitely played a part. And I think we don't always realize how powerful the little seeds that we grow can grow up to become, you know, incredibly powerful aspects of our movement. And I think that's a really, really powerful thing. So that's my story, and that is why I am very excited to say that you should join DSA. If you haven't already on this call, you should definitely sign up. And we're going to share the link again in the chat. And additionally, if you want to get involved in fighting for that 2024 program that we talked about, winning a better world, fighting for a real political alternative for working class people, you know, sign up to join the FORK program and to fight for the Workers Deserve More 2024 program. And additionally, you know, we have our sights set big. So we're fighting for this world where we're winning all these things, a working class democracy, like we talked about earlier in the call. And we have our sights set on everything that's going to happen in the next couple of years, including, you know, the call for a general strike in 2028, led by UAW. And we are, you know, we're thinking about that as DSA and pushing forward for that. And so I just want to encourage everybody to like get in now because we're going places. And And so we will, yeah. Oh, and the other link we'll share in the chat is if you want to get involved in the DNC protest and the DNC organizing, there's definitely ways to plug into that, whether you are located in Chicago or not. So we will share that link in the chat too, and you can sign up for the DNC form. But yeah, join DSA, find your chapter, get organized, because we are not stopping here, and we have a world to build.
Thank you so much, Francis. Yeah, I mean, I see folks posting things about checking out EWOC. We also have a tenants organizing program. We've said it before. I don't know that we've said it tonight, but one of our fun things that we say is, if you hate your boss, if you hate your landlord, if you hate your mayor, join DSA and fight for better of all those three. Well, we don't want any landlords, but fight for your own ownership over your work, and fight for better mayors and no landlords at all. So we are coming up on the hour. I do want to launch another poll, and the poll is, this one is specifically geared toward folks who are on the call who are not yet DSA members. And we are going to ask you, will you join DSA? And if your answer is yes, do you have a plan to connect with your chapter? So that poll should launch here in just a minute. And in the meantime, check the chat. We've got links for emergency tenant organizing. So if you're having trouble with your landlord, that is what they are there to help you do. Emergency workplace organizing. So if you're having trouble with your boss, that is what they're there to do. And then you can always just join DSA, get involved in your local chapter, talk to folks, get things started, bring back ideas, figure out what you need to organize for in your community to make it a more just, more democratic place. I can't guarantee you that it'll make you feel less hopeless in a world that feels like it's burning down, but I will tell you that for me, it really did. It really made me feel empowered to be with so many fellow people who are fighting for the same thing. And so we're having a little bit of a problem with the poll, so sorry if I'm just rambling a little bit. Maybe just, oh, it popped up. Never mind. I was going to say shout it out in the chat, but this is the wrong poll, I think. Okay, let's just shout it out in the chat. If you're not a DSA member, are you looking to maybe get involved in your local chapter? Okay, polls up. Whew, we did it. We mastered tech, folks. It wasn't me. I was no help at all. There's a reason that I am doing the talking and not the link sharing, because I will break it. Yeah, and please note, I saw some questions in the chat about folks who don't have a chapter where they are. There are a couple options. One is there are a lot of national committees that need help, and you can organize with our national committees. And that can be doing anything from admin work to helping design campaigns, all kinds of, you can help me with my tech problems. So many options. The other thing that is possible is you could start a chapter. If you're pretty much anywhere in the country, we have, I'll look for the link in just a second, but we have a way that you can look up whether or not there's a chapter near you. And if there is not, we do have a system that will help you connect with folks who are near you and potentially start. We have a whole system. You start with an organizing committee, which is maybe just a few people. And then you work your way up and you come up with some bylaws, and you figure out what incorporation needs to look like, and you figure out what zip codes you might want to have. But really, we have DSA chapters in most places where there is dense population, and we have a lot of DSA chapters that cover like a big swath of a state in more rural states. So it is very likely that there is DSA chapter near you. You can also always, one thing I do, because I'm kind of between two DSA chapters in the middle of nowhere, is I'm sort of halfway between Ithaca and Syracuse, and I just kind of do both. And I'm working obviously at the national level now, but you can kind of just dally. It's fine. We want you to organize with us. So we will work with you to make it possible for you to get in and do some actions with us. Okay. We're going to share this poll. All right. So we have, more than are you able to see the poll? Okay, yes. So it looks like we've got a whole bunch of people who are very excited to join their chapter and get involved. That rocks. We've got a bunch more people who aren't sure yet, but they'd love to learn more. That's awesome. We're going to try to follow up with you, but you can also spend a little time on our website, look up your local chapter, see what they're up to, and see if that appeals to you. And then we have a bunch of members who are just here to get hype. So shout out to them. Definitely encourage you to run a program like this in your own chapter. And yeah, so lots of links in the chat. We are at the hour. If everybody maybe wants to give a big solidarity shout out in the chat, and we will say good night. Here, I'll start us. Solidarity. I can't unmute you all because it's webinar style, but thanks so much for coming. We hope everybody has a great night. We hope to see you at a DSA event soon.